Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Welcome back to episode number 118, guys. Thank you so much for joining us as we gear up for Super Bowl week. There are some interesting things going on about these trailers that we'll talk about later on. Is Marvel skipping the Super Bowl? We'll talk about all of that and more in today's episode. Guys, thank you again for joining us on this weekly podcast journey as we head towards February, and then March is Daredevil and lots of fun stuff there. So lots to look forward to. If you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to do so. Give this video a like if you could, and let me know what you think about any of the topics in the comments down below. If you're interested in the audio-only platforms, we are on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Overcast. That is where the podcast is posted in full first, Saturday mornings US time, so check it out there if you're interested, and then it's posted in full on the YouTube channel a few days later. Guys, I'm excited to talk about these topics. We're in Super Bowl week, and we're still gearing up for the Oscars, so lots of exciting things going on. Let's get into today's topics. Alrighty, guys, it's not quite over yet. We are not quite finished, but we are so close. We're on the cusp. Guys, this is continuing and heading towards the conclusion of our Defenders Saga rewatch. Today, we're going to be talking about The Punisher Season 2. As we look to wrap this thing up, this was a goal of mine. I started rewatching Daredevil Season 1, right around the time that Daredevil Born Again came out, just under a year ago. And at that point, it was really just going to be about Daredevil. I was just going to watch Daredevil and maybe Defenders. But I decided, you know what, let's give Jessica Jones a try. And 10 months later, here I am on the cusp of having watched the entire Netflix Marvel saga. And let me just say, it's been a fun journey. And so we finished Punisher Season 2. We have one more new show, Jessica Jones Season 3, that I haven't seen. And then I am going to do my absolute best to try to fit in Daredevil Born Again Season 1 before Daredevil Born Again Season 2 and get that video out, and then we'll be on our way to Daredevil Born Again Season 2 fully caught up, and just in time too, because Jessica Jones will obviously be making her return in Daredevil Born Again Season 2, and then Punisher will be returning pretty shortly after in Spider-Man Brand New Day. So anyways, that was all just a little bit of a preamble. Let's get to Punisher Season 2. For those of you who don't know, by the way, for those of you who are just checking this out for the first time, I started out, like I said, watching Daredevil Season 1. I had seen Daredevil before. I had seen Defenders before, but I hadn't seen any of the other shows before. And so I decided to give it a try, just started going straight through. And so this is going to be a first time watching. I had not seen Punisher Season 2 before, but I had seen every single other MCU show up until that point before Punisher Season 2, so not including Jessica Jones or Daredevil Born Again. Jessica Jones Season 3, rather, and Daredevil Born Again Season 1. Punisher Season 1 surprised me. It really did, because I thought, what could you really do with a character this violent, this opposed to, not morality, because he is a character who has a very gray moral compass, but he is a character who strays really heavily on the side of anti-hero, though he does some really horrific things at times. It's a really interesting character that I think could pop up in a show like Daredevil, right, in Daredevil Season 2 and Daredevil Born Again, but it's a character that it's hard to imagine. It was hard for me, at least before Season 1, to imagine how you could center an entire show around him. But Punisher Season 1 really surprised me. It is, to me, my favorite season of Netflix Marvel television, aside from any season of Daredevil, right? I love Season 1 and 3 of Daredevil. I was just really surprised by the way that they were able to ground the character. I loved that they brought Ebon Moss-Bachrach as David, I want to say. It's already been a few months since I've seen the show. But, I mean, it was a great way to anchor the character. And I think giving the moral compass, again, of having, you know, the family still be at the center of this show, his own family, of course, the death of his wife and kids, and bringing in a dynamic antagonist in Billy Russo, aka Jigsaw, although he really takes on the Jigsaw persona in Season 2, was great. Ben Barnes was great. Wasn't, you know, I still had some things that I didn't like about the show stylistically and just subject wise as well. Again, he does some horrific things, and gruesome gruesome violence is not always my cup of tea. In fact, it rarely is, but I think that the story that was behind this character really surprised me. So I was excited for Season 2. I thought, okay, Punisher Season 1 really surprised me. Let's see what Season 2 has in store. And Punisher Season 2, disappointingly, I was watching the show, and as we were getting into the show, I kind of thought, oh, this doesn't quite feel the same. It just doesn't quite feel the same as Punisher Season 1 did. And it suffers, in my opinion, from the classic Marvel Netflix TV show syndrome, which is, and it's frustrating because almost every single season of television for Marvel, or not every single one, but at least a good few of them have suffered from this. And it is frustrating, even some of the good ones. Daredevil Season 2, for example. Luke Cage Season 1. And now Punisher Season 2. It is the syndrome of having 2 seasons in one. Punisher Season 2, I think, really suffers for this. Because not only are there 2 seasons in one. So, for example, in Luke Cage, right? In Luke Cage, it was really odd because it felt like there were 2 distinct seasons going on. First half and second half. Which I don't hate, but I still would have rather preferred an overarching story over the whole thing. Daredevil Season 2, I think, was a little more successful, although, again, Punisher and the Elektra storylines just felt like they were both really great on their own, but just not really coalescing in a good way. But because they were both so good on their own, it was more, I still really like Daredevil Season 2. Punisher Season 2 is not in the same way that Luke Cage Season 1 was, where it's like first half, second half, they're 2 different seasons, right, with Cottonmouth and then with Diamondback. There are 2 distinct storylines going on in parallel, and shockingly, they almost never overlap. I was shocked at the fact that an entire season of television went by with basically two A storylines going on. The one with John Pilgrim and Amy, and the one and the senator and all that kind of stuff, and the one with Russo. And not to say, right, if the takeaway here for you guys, if you've been listening to my Defenders Saga Revisited, the takeaway for you, I hope, is not that, Access Blockbusters just wants seasons of television just to have one big story and no other subplots. Subplots are great. One of my favorite shows. You guys, if you've been following the channel, I love Stranger Things. And one of the greatest strengths to me of Stranger Things is that they're able to have many different subplots per season, all coalescing and converging upon a single point in the finale. That is, to me, one of the biggest strengths of Stranger Things. And even if different subplots seem to be in very different places, you can kind of begin to see very early on how they might start to converge. Punisher Season 2, I was waiting. Especially early on, I was like, okay, let's kind of see, what is Russo going to do? How is this going to tie into Amy at all? Is it going to tie into Amy at all? Is it going to tie into John Pilgrim at all? No. Literally, there is almost zero overlap. To the point where, and by the way, I'm just getting this out of the way. It sounds like I hate the season. I like the season a decent bit. Although, again, I'm very frustrated by it. But I wanted to get this out of the way before we get to the stuff that I actually did like. But I have to say, the entire season, right? I want to say the bulk of the season really focuses, aside from Amy, because I think Amy at a certain point is just sort of there, and we'll get to my thoughts on Amy, but she's just there, right, at a certain point, because once you get past the scenes at the beginning and the first few episodes where they're being attacked by John and things like that, Amy's just kind of hanging around for the ride. And the brunt of the season is really focused on a lot of the things carrying over from Season 1. Madani, Billy Russo, Curtis, and Mahoney. And that is really, it seems like, the central thrust of what the season is going to be as we head towards the final couple episodes. But then John Pilgrim makes a, we'll say, quote-unquote, triumphant return, and the entire finale is basically dedicated to him and that storyline. And Billy Russo just kind of dies. Now, I think that some of the scenes where he, the last scenes that he has with his phone call with Curtis, and I think that the scene where Frank kills him is fitting for where those characters are in terms of their story arcs as well. But I was watching the finale, and I was thinking, I thought that this was about Billy and Frank. Frankly, no pun intended. That's what I thought this was about. And so to see that this is really the direction that we're going in, where this final thing is about, John Pilgrim, it's a little baffling to me. And that really, to me, is the reason that Punisher Season 2 cannot be elevated to me to the levels of Punisher Season 1. On top of the fact that, while I think conceptually there are some really interesting things going on with John and with the senator and his son and the photographs and the way that they want to sort of groom the son to be in a position of power and try to protect him from certain people who, are opposed to him being gay. There's a lot of really interesting political undercurrents and reflections of what's going on in the real world today. This was obviously, 6 years ago, but still there are some things that are carrying over. But anyways, I think that conceptually there are some really interesting things that are going on there. I just didn't think they executed super well. It was a choice, whoever the actor was who was playing John. to kind of play it in that mannerism, but it just wasn't working for me. So every time we cut to that storyline, I was like, not great. On the flip side, I think that the Billy Russo storyline was actually quite compelling. I think that Ben Barnes, again, puts in a dynamic performance. He's great. And I think that while Amnesia is sort of an easy way to kind of, get past a lot of things, it's very Spider-Man 3, right? Where James Franco loses his memory and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, sure, it is what it is. But I think that a lot of the development that he has in this sort of Jigsaw, Russo 2.0 is interesting. And I think that while some of the things I didn't completely buy his relationship with Krista necessarily. I think Krista as a character could have been fleshed out a little bit more, but I like the way that Madani is the way that they treat that character post season 1 and how she's really grappling with the fact that she has this burning hatred for Russo. I think that storyline really did work for me. And so again, it was just about the balance, right? Of these are very clearly 2A storylines for me. And I was very baffled by the decision to just not try to tie these two things together and instead just pretend that these two crazy things were happening almost coincidentally at the same time. And that really was my biggest gripe with the season. Now, I said I'd get that out of the way and talk about things I really liked. I really did like Amy. And I think it's a tried and true trope where you have this character who seems unlovable and seems like he's past, beyond saving and et cetera, et cetera. That's Frank, obviously. And it's a very tried and true trope to give him somebody to care about. The Mandalorian, right? The Mandalorian with Grogu and Joel with Ellie and The Last of Us. It's been done and it is still continuing to be done. But it's effective. It is very effective. I think that, when Amy says goodbye to Frank at the end, I bought that. I bought that there is a genuine care because you know what it does. And to a lesser extent, but also to a still powerful extent, what Eben Moss-Bachrach did in season 1 is bring out the humanity in a character that otherwise is almost unredeemable. But there is still that bit of humanity in this character that continues to make the Punisher such an interesting character. And that is what prevents the Punisher from going to an extent where I'm like, I just can't watch this anymore because he's just killing people and he's gone off the rails. He is, by the way, he does go off the rails. That is what the character is. But the way that they're able to really, with Curtis as well, be able to ground this character in a sense of humanity, I think is a very strong thing. I think that's also what Karen Page is able to do for this character as well, in a very interesting way. I don't know when or where they discovered this dynamic. It must have been while they were filming Daredevil season 2. They were like, oh, we got something here with John Bernthal and Deborah Ann Wall and their characters. Because now Karen Page and Punisher are kind of, I think their dynamic is something unique, where they both kind of need each other in an interesting way. And so I think one of the things that this show really recognizes super well is that, Punisher needs to be grounded in those bits of humanity. Otherwise, it's kind of unwatchable. So anyways, I enjoyed Punisher season 2. I think the Billy Russo stuff was way more interesting than anything else going on. And so I was just disappointed that the two main storylines with John, Amy, the senator and his parents were not really connecting with the Billy Russo storyline, which again, I liked. And B, that, that the Billy Russo storyline didn't take precedent, right? There wasn't a clear driving force behind the show, in my opinion. That doesn't mean, look, I think that having seen these 2 seasons of Punisher, I feel like I have such a better understanding of Frank Castle that I'm even more excited now to see him in Daredevil Born in season 1 when I see that, and then in Spider-Man Brand New Day and in his own special, because I think how this character ticks a little bit better, and I really feel for him in a certain way, even though, again, he's doing horrific things, right? That's one of the things about Punisher season 1 that just makes it not easy to watch, even though I think it's really good, is that he is still a character who is willing to turn his back on the audience, which is a phrase that I think John Bernthal used in terms of describing what the Punisher special was going to do. It was going to really have Frank turn his back on the audience. And I think that is something where they continue to straddle the line. And I think that it makes him a compelling character. So can't wait to see where he comes back next, even if I did have some gripes and some qualms with this season. Guys, have you seen Punisher season 2? We are on our way. I'm going to try to get Jessica Jones season 3 out in the near future, and then Daredevil Born Again season 1. And then hopefully by the time that is all wrapped up, maybe we'll do a ranking segment as well. I have that ranking ready to go. Whenever that happens, we will then dive into Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Let me know what you think about Punisher Season 2, though, in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, there's been this interesting rumor going around recently. It revolves around an MCU movie that, frankly, could be the biggest of all time in terms of the MCU. It could be the biggest of all time, period. I mean, if from everything we're hearing about Avengers Doomsday, that film is really set to be one of the most epic movies ever made. But the follow-up to Avengers Doomsday, Avengers Secret Wars, well, that movie could blow whatever Doomsday is doing out of the water. Because I've been saying for almost a year now, anyone and everyone that has ever been in a Marvel project, not just the MCU, in a Marvel project. We saw a little bit of this, a glimpse of this with Deadpool and Wolverine. We saw Blade return. We saw Elektra return. We saw a character who hasn't even made his appearance in live action in terms of Marvel, but was going to with Channing Tatum's Gambit. Anyone and everyone who ever could have been or was in a movie or show under Marvel is liable to appear in Avengers Secret Wars. That movie is going to be crazy. Except according to rumors, it may not be a movie. It might be 2 movies, because a lot of rumors are floating around saying that Avengers Doomsday, or Avengers Secret Wars rather, is set to be split into 2 films. And that's a decision they're making right now, and they're sort of halting production because they were going to get into production in spring of 2026. They were going to start filming it, but there are reports and rumors saying that they have paused this. Now, this segment in particular is not commenting. We're not going to do a deep dive into the veracity of these claims. I am not here to say, oh, I believe them, I don't believe them. Frankly, I don't know. I don't think we will know for a little while. So I think we should just keep our eyes peeled for that. But I do want to tackle the question here today. Again, not knowing what Avengers Doomsday even is going to be like, not knowing at all what Avengers Secret Wars is going to be like. Should Avengers Secret Wars be split into 2? That is the question we are talking about today. There are a couple sides to this argument. I think there are some reasons to believe that just based on what Avengers Secret Wars could be, it should be 2 films. And there are also other reasons, again, not knowing what the film is about, that I think it should not be split into 2 films. So let's get the obvious reason out of the way as to why it should be split into 2 films. The obvious reason is that the story is just too big. If you make a film, or if you set out to make an Avengers Secret Wars film, and let's say that Steve McFeely or whoever is writing the film is writing the script, and he has an amazing story in mind, post-Doomsday, and he gets to the end, and it's 600 pages, right? For those of you who are, for a frame of reference, actually 600 pages would be crazy, but let's just say it's something like, 300 pages, for example. For those of you who don't know, a page of a script is generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, equated to 1 minute of screen time. So that would be 300 minutes. That would be, for those of you who are doing math at home, that would be 5 hours. That would be a 5-hour movie. And let's just say that Steve McFeely finishes his script and he's like, this is amazing. I can't cut it down any longer. I mean, you always can, right? But let's just say for the integrity of the movie, he can't cut it down. Then yes, Avengers Secret Wars should be split into 2. And I think that there is some plausibility with this, because as Doomsday is wrapping up, let's just say that they are, they're focusing on Doomsday, but of course, Steve McFeely or whoever's writing the script of Secret Wars is writing as they go along, and they're seeing what's happening in Doomsday. And let's just say that they had an outline for the story of Secret Wars, but as they're writing it, now that they're seeing what's going on in Doomsday and some of the things that they're implementing, they're like, oh, this story is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And let's not forget, maybe different actors have been signed on as well that they weren't anticipating before, so they have to add more storylines and subplots and things like that. Let's just say, right? Let's just say that Secret Wars is just getting too big. Then yes, creatively, you should not, I don't think. I mean, I'm sure there are creative ways and there are very reasonable ways to shrink that movie down into 3 hours. Let's just say 3.5 hours if you really wanted to. But if you just get to the point where that's not possible, then yes, Secret Wars should be 2 parts for the creative integrity of what that movie is going to be. Because I would much rather see 2 Secret Wars films in a heartbeat rather than 1 Secret Wars film that felt and looked scrunched, and it just didn't feel like it really did the story justice. That's not what I want to see at all. So that is the obvious reason as to why Secret Wars should be split into 2. A couple other reasons. Maybe there's just this natural middle point that they're like, okay, well, we want to end off this part of the story, just like Infinity War. Because again, I think that in some weird way, you could have made Infinity War and Endgame one film, I guess. It would have been crazy and chaotic, but there is this natural ending point to one half of that story, which is Thanos snapping his fingers, right? And so if there is that kind of moment in Secret Wars where they're like, yeah, I mean, we could fit all of this into one movie, but maybe there's just this natural. So it's kind of similar to that first point of if you feel like there's a natural point, and let's be honest, if you feel like you can make more money, this is not me saying this is what I think Disney would be saying and Marvel would be saying, then yeah, split Secret Wars into two. So those are two reasons why I think Marvel would split Secret Wars into two films. On the other hand, I think there is also a pretty decent argument as to why this shouldn't happen. And that argument is time. Because let's face it, right? The Multiverse Saga has not been successful. And I'm not saying it's a money thing, right? The pandemic hurt the box office and whatnot, but we had successful films like Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, almost made $1 billion, despite losing Chadwick Boseman from the film. We had Spider-Man No Way Home almost making $2 billion, despite coming out basically at the end of the pandemic, or the brunt of the pandemic. So, and Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness made $900 million. There were successes within phase 4 and phase 5 of the MCU. But by and large, people have been panning the Multiverse Saga in general. It's time for this thing to end. And dragging it out one more time, again, unless the hype from Doomsday and Secret Wars Part 1, if we're doing that, is so massive that yes, we have to do a Secret Wars Part 2. And that's a risk that they're going to have to take because they're not going to know. They're going to have to start production of Secret Wars before Doomsday comes out. And in that case, they would have to be so incredibly confident in whatever the Doomsday product was that they would be willing to make this choice. But honestly, I think the Multiverse Saga, I want it to end in the best way possible. I also just want it to end. I think it's just got to end at some point. And the other thing about that too, with this time argument, is that if you're halting production right now, right? Let's just say you're going to push back production for a little bit. Because maybe there's a world in which they still split Secret Wars into two parts. They make that decision. Maybe they've already made that decision. And they go ahead with filming. And they finish filming, let's just say late 2026. Like, let's just say August or September of 2026. Then, yeah, they have a year plus to finish the film. And maybe you move up the release date of Avengers Secret Wars to something like July. Feels like the latest big window. Right, because you're not going to move Avengers Secret Wars into August or September. It's just not a great window to release movies in. So, maybe you take the last weekend in July, just like how Spider-Man Brand New Day is. That feels like one of the last big weekends you can get until Christmas, which is where Secret Wars is right now, Christmas 2027. Maybe you move it up, to that point. But again, Secret Wars Part 2 would still probably be coming out in early 2028 at the earliest, and even then the best window you have is still May 2028. Regardless, I think, sure, maybe there's a world in which you release Secret Wars Part 1 in December 2027. You would still need to release Secret Wars Part 2 probably May at the earliest, which means you're not going to wrap up whatever this Multiverse Saga is until at least May 2028. And guys, I don't know about you, I don't think we have time for that, because by that point, I want whatever the reset is to have happened. If they're going to do a soft reboot or whatever the universe is going to look like after that, fine. That has to happen so that we can get onto the February date, the May date, the July date, the November date. Because it's just, at that point, we got to see X-Men. If Blade is ever going to happen, Blade, Doctor Strange 3, Black Panther 3, Shang-Chi 2. Because if the further you push this along, Shang-Chi 2 is not going to come out until 2030. Is that what we're saying? It's just time. It's time to move on. I totally am fine. I would have liked these films to be a little bit earlier, but I'm fine with the idea that you want to really take your time with Doomsday and Secret Wars and push them back to December of 26 and 27 and have Secret Wars be the only movie in 2027. Because to me, there's no feasible way that you can make Secret Wars Part 1 come out in May 2027 and then Secret Wars Part 2 in December 2027 and keep that timeline. There's no way you can do that. So to me, cutting Secret Wars into two parts really constitutes, the only way you can do that is by having the end of the Multiverse Saga pushed back further, which pushes back every single other project that was in the pipeline. And I just don't want that to happen at this point. So there are arguments for both sides. At the end of the day, unless there is a legitimate, incredibly necessary reason to split the story into two parts, I would much rather this just be one film. And let's just be done with it. And again, I'm saying this as somebody who really wants Secret Wars to be the best movie it can be. I would love nothing more than to come out of Secret Wars and be like, oh, that's amazing. Would I have loved to have seen more? For sure. but I think at this point, it's time to move on. So guys, what do you think about this? What do you think about the rumor that Secret Wars might be split into 2 parts? And do you want that to happen? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, while we wait for whatever this new live-action spin-off of Stranger Things is going to be, whether it's dealing directly with that rock that turned Henry into Vecna, or whatever the case might be, the Duffer Brothers were hinting as much anyways, that the rock was going to be some part of this spin-off. While we wait for that, we actually are getting some more Stranger Things this year, funnily enough. We just finished up with Stranger Things Season 5, which seems like one of the more controversial seasons. Again, I feel like there's such little room for error, margin for error with final seasons. I've said this many times, and I just feel like Stranger Things 5 kind of suffered for that. Is it my favorite season? No. I've done extensive coverage on this, on the finale and all the different stuff. I still liked it, but again, that's just me. I love Stranger Things. And speaking of loving Stranger Things, more Stranger Things is on the way. And it's just not in the way that we expected. We talked about this a couple months ago with a first look, more than a teaser trailer, of Stranger Things Tales of 85. Or Tales from 85, rather, which is taking place, 1985, is going to be between seasons 2 and 3. So this is right after Hopper kind of officially adopts Elle, and the gang are kind of all together. They're hanging out, summer vacation, so Elle is no longer imprisoned in that cabin. So it seems like a pretty good place to have all the kids back, as we see in this trailer. And really the big question for me, that has very little to do with the actual quality of this series, although I think it should be worth bringing up, is the fact that, okay, and I by the way, did a full rewatch of Stranger Things. All of those recap and rewatch segments are on the YouTube channel if you want to check those out. Seasons 1, 2, 3, 4, and now 5. And, what's interesting is that I was looking for season 2 and 3. I was specifically looking at that time period of the end of season 2 and the beginning of season 3. Because by the time I was rewatching those seasons, I had already known that this was coming out. So I was looking for, is there a way to make that transition work? Because assuming, and based on this trailer, there's more Upside Down adventures. I don't know what that creature is, a Demogorgon kind of monster version of a Demogorgon. I don't even know what that thing is. But, it says something survived. Okay, something survived. So some kind of mutant Demogorgon Upside Down creature. That's well and good. If none of the characters reference anything, I know it was probably, because it looks like it's taking place in the winter, so maybe 6 months before the events of Stranger Things Season 3. Nobody references it at all. I guess that's okay. I guess that's fine. I don't need the characters to be like, oh, I was so traumatized by whatever happened. But it's still kind of weird. Anyways, that's not really any indictment on the quality of whatever this show is going to be, because, based on this trailer, it looks charming. It doesn't look like anything that's really going to be a game changer in terms of Stranger Things. I almost liken it to those sort of little anthology series that Star Wars has been doing with Tales of the Jedi and Tales of the Sith, for example. Those are fun, right? And those are, it helps kind of build out some characters and build out some time periods. I even think maybe like a Maul Shadow Lord, might be something like that. Although I think Maul Shadow Lord looks really, really good, to be honest with you. But I think that, based on what I see in this trailer, I first of all, I think that the voice cast is really good, actually, from what I've heard, because I think that's one thing that would immediately take you in and out of a show like this, is that I think maybe Hopper was the most egregious example, where I listened to the voice actor for Hopper at the beginning of this trailer, and I was like, that doesn't really sound like David Harbour. But the other actors, actually, I think were pretty solid. I think the one playing or voicing Finn Wolfhard's character Mike sounded like Mike during season 2 and season 3. I think the voice of Dustin sounded pretty much like Dustin. So I was like, okay, that's one big thing, that's going to help me stay invested in the show. I know that obviously the original actors aren't coming back to voice their characters, and even if they did, they would have to change the voices and modulate them because they don't sound like that anymore, and that's all fine. But I think that it looks like they're having another adventure. It looks like there's some kind of mutant creature that escaped from whatever the tunnels were in season 2, and so that's going to be sort of the crux of this all. I like that you're filling in some of the blanks, right? It seems like we're getting the development of the relationship between Max and Lucas, and I think that Mike and Elle are starting to develop their own relationship. Obviously, at the beginning of season 3, they are very much together, to Hopper's dismay. So I think that from what we see here, I see nothing to dissuade me from the show. I think it looks fun. Also coming out relatively soon I think that I have to remind myself that when we see a trailer for a TV show, it usually means that the show itself is a couple months away. Because I'm so used to movies having trailers come out 6 months before. Even we're talking about Doomsday trailers a year before. But TV trailers, for whatever reason, there must be some kind of marketing reason, come out literally a couple months before. We just got a Daredevil Born Again Season 2 trailer almost exactly 2 months before that show's coming out. And it's pretty much similar here, just about 3 months away from this show. So in April, we'll get to see Stranger Things Tales from 85, and we'll talk about it. And I'm excited, although again, I don't think it's going to be anything game-changing, but I'm looking forward to it a decent bit as a big Stranger Things fan. Guys, what do you think about this first official teaser trailer for Stranger Things Tales from 85? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, big news for Disney. This could be a moment that we look back on in a few years and either hail it as, well, actually 3 options. Number 1, we either hail it as a fantastic move, one of the best things that Disney could have ever done, just an amazing thing, or, and maybe this is also not a bad thing, we just kind of think, oh yeah, I mean, we have a new CEO at Disney, and that's great. Because honestly, I feel like that may not be the worst thing in the world. Disney is not at a horrible place right now. I mean, they were not at the peak of where they were pre-pandemic rather, but they're not at a terrible place. Not like they were a couple years ago where they were really struggling, relatively speaking, obviously. Or the third option, just as we were saying a couple years ago, we might be looking back on this moment and saying this is a disaster. And Disney made yet another mistake because Disney has just found its new CEO. This is official. Disney has found its new CEO. And I'm going to tell you what, because there are 2 pieces of news here that I think are notable, but obviously all the headlines are going to go to CEO. And of course, we'll talk about the CEO. But honestly, I don't really care about that news. I do, but I don't. Because there is another piece of news here that is giving me much more confidence in the direction that Disney is going to go in the future. So let's start out with the big headline here. Number 1, Bob Iger. Bob Iger, for some background, had been the CEO of Disney during one of its most prosperous eras in the 2000s to 2010s. He was just doing big things for Disney. This is when Marvel was a part of Disney now, and Star Wars, and say what you will about the sequel trilogy, but those movies made money, and Pixar and Disney Animation. Bob Iger was killing it as the CEO. He then decides, I'm going to retire, and chooses his successor, Bob Chapek. Now, Chapek was not handed any favors when he had to steer Disney through COVID, through the pandemic, because, let's face it, nobody was handed any favors of having to steer through COVID. Now, you weren't, I wasn't, small business owners definitely weren't, and big business owners, like people at Disney, definitely weren't either. And so that doesn't fall on him. What does fall on him, though, is the sort of calamity, relatively speaking, that happened afterwards, where he mandated that his creatives, including Kevin Feige, we talk a lot about this when it comes to Marvel, mandated a bunch of quantity over quality. I'm sure he didn't explicitly say that, but just tons of quality, or quantity rather, for the streaming service Disney Plus, which was launching at the time. Disney Plus, by the way, though, people forget, this was being developed, obviously, under Bob Iger. So it's not like Bob Chapek was the one who just invented Disney Plus. I mean, Disney Plus was an inevitability because of the streaming wars. But Bob Chapek then said, let's just make as much stuff as we possibly can. There are other missteps as well along the way, but clearly it just became obvious that Bob Chapek was not the right man for the job. And so Bob Iger, a couple years ago, had to step back in as the interim CEO once again. And it seems like that Disney has been heading in a better direction recently. I mean, box office-wise, Zootopia 2 and Moana 2, I mean, their movies are making lots of money, and Avengers Doomsday looks like it's headed towards the right track. It looks like Marvel is course-correcting as well. So all good signs there. But Bob Iger was never going to stay for long. And I think 2026 was always the target year, and he was going to be stepping down in 2026 no matter what. Now, the official news here, I think, says that he's going to be stepping down officially in March of 2026, but he's going to be staying on through the rest of the year as a senior advisor, which I think is also a great thing. And so they have landed on Disney Experiences chairman. I'm reading from an article from Deadline here. John D'Armo as the CEO and successor to Bob Iger. Again, there's another little bit of news here that we'll get to that I think is far more important, honestly, than John D'Armo as the CEO of Disney. But, I still think this is a good thing. So this is what Deadline has to say about D'Armo. Quote, sources say that in regards to D'Armo, there's already a feeling that he is, I think there's some typos here, that he is has an Iger-like charismatic side that should go over well with people in the film world. While insiders are hopeful, some are wary of Chapek 2.0 situation. Yeah, me too. Speaking of former Disney CEO Bob Chapek, who also headed up parks and experiences prior to his CEO promotion, but had his shares of battles with the film community during his short tenure as Iger's replacement from 2020 to 2022. While Chapek had, I'm reading this because I think this is important to just give context to what's going on here. Quote, while Chapek had plenty of obstacles to overcome, he took over Disney the day before the world was shut down by COVID. That's crazy. He did himself no favors with how he handled messaging about Disney's long-term plans for the film business, including being vocal and messaging to creatives about how Disney would like to send less product to theaters and more to Disney+. So this is all stuff that I had been reiterating right before. So that all makes sense. Darmo himself, again, he's coming from the parks experience. I don't know a whole lot about him. I know about as much about him as I did about Bob Chapek before Chapek became the CEO. And frankly, at the time, I wasn't doing YouTube at the time when he was announced as a successor, but I was like, yeah, fine, whatever, good. And that didn't go over well. So it seems like industry insiders are more optimistic about this, but I just think time will tell about Bob Chapek, or not Bob Chapek, rather. That's a little bit of a slip there, but about John Darmo. That is not the news that I am most particularly interested in, because along with this news, Disney has also, a little more quietly, but still importantly, elevated Dana Walden as President and Chief Creative Officer. Now, why is this important? Well, I am not personally familiar with Dana Walden, but everything that has been said about her with this news of her elevation is all really good. Quote, this is what Deadline has to say. Quote, Deadline has confirmed that as part of Walden's new role, her former co-Disney Entertainment co-chairman Alan Bergman, who Alan Bergman has been the spearhead of the movies for a long time at Disney, will now report to her, while all other major leaders under the film umbrella will continue to report to Bergman. That list includes Disney Live Action and 20th Century Chief David Greenbaum and, importantly, Marvel Studios President Kevin Feige. While her expertise lies in television, when it comes to managing talent relationships this is really the key here to this whole article. There are few executives who have had a better track record than Walden, and her reputation for listening to the creative community and serving as a buffer between the business and creative sides of the company should only help in generating favor. Studio insiders go on to add that Walden and Bergman already have strong ties after sharing the co-president title for the past couple of years, and their relationship should help strengthen the film side of the company. That is all I needed to hear. Again, this could all end terribly, right? For all we know, John Darmo is a power-hungry businessman, and he decides to seize on that power and make all the people do whatever they want. I'm not a business person, as you can probably tell, so I don't really know the inner machinations of the C-suite at Disney. But it's possible. I've been saying John the whole time. Sorry. Josh. His name is Josh. I apologize. I've been saying John the whole time. That was unintentional. His name is Josh. Josh Darmo. For all we know, this could end even worse than Bob Chapek. It seems like, though, Disney is set on continuity, as the article points out. And more importantly, Bob Iger is committed to really, really promoting the creative side of his studio, which, again, was one of the pitfalls of Bob Chapek. So while I don't think we'll ever know in the short term, in the next year, in the next couple years, how this is going to go, unless something disastrous happens, I do think there is a lot of reason to hope that this is actually a really good direction for Disney to head, especially given the fact that Bob Iger is no longer going to be at the company. And again, I think the news that Dana Walden, who has a really strong reputation amongst the film community and the creatives, which is what I really care about, right? That's what we talk about here. I think that is the most encouraging thing of all. Guys, do you have any strong opinions about Josh Darmo as the new CEO of Disney and Dana Walden as the new president and chief creative officer of Disney? Do you guys have any thoughts about this? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, perhaps one of the most interesting movies to be releasing this year, a movie that I think, regardless of if it's good, regardless of if it's bad, it will have eyeballs on it. That is the Michael Jackson biopic entitled Michael. And we have a new trailer to talk about. There was a teaser trailer a couple months ago that we talked about on this channel, and I talked about my thoughts at that point. But long story short, I thought it looked good, but obviously you can't really talk about Michael Jackson and a biopic about Michael Jackson without acknowledging the fact that doing a biopic about him is a complicated affair. It is just a complicated task to take on. And we're not here to talk about all the personal details about his life or the allegations and all the different things that have been said about him and his time towards the end of his life. I mean, there are just so many things that you could say about Michael Jackson, but that's not the sort of channel here, right? Different people have different opinions, and I think regardless of what you think about him as a person or whatever you want to, whatever you want to say, I mean, he is musically one of the greatest musicians in the modern era. His influence on music has really been unmatched, and so doing a Michael Jackson biopic again presents a lot of challenges, and I'm not going to be one to just completely disregard it. I will say, just looking at this new trailer, because that's what we're here to talk about today, I think what is being presented on screen, just what is being presented on screen, looks really good. In terms of just filmmaking, the way that it's shot, Antoine Fuqua looks like he is doing a really good job handling the camera and handling just the weight and magnitude of this whole thing, this whole project. It looks like it really is going to be just a celebration of Michael Jackson as a music icon and, how he got to that point, especially early on in his career. Again, I'm just letting you know, or I'm just trying to relay what I think it looks like without giving any sort of, personal opinion or indictment on what that means. Because again, you're more than welcome to make your own opinions, but that's not really what this channel is here for. I will say, though, kind of related to that point, I suppose, this film has been interesting because this film has been delayed a few times. And I was just doing some reading on Wikipedia, so again, it's not deep research, I apologize for that. But, I was doing some reading and some research, and it's interesting because from what I've seen and from what I've read, this movie could be a part one to, this Michael franchise. It originally apparently had a 4-hour cut, and then they were deciding on whether or not to split it in two. But now the wording is something like, well, we're just going to see how this first one does. So I'm not actually sure if they have a second film canned and ready to go, or if they are just waiting to see how the first one does and then we'll make another film. I actually have no idea what the release strategy is right now. If you guys could let me know, if you know in the comments, that would be great, because I don't know. And the reason I bring this up, right, because yes, obviously we want to look at this film in its, its own individual moment, right? I think that that's super important. But it's hard to deny as well that making a biopic about the beginning of Michael Jackson's life, which it seems like this is what the trailer is heavily focusing on, and making a biopic about the second half of his life are two very different tasks. Again, just based on where Michael Jackson was in the public eye, some of the allegations, and all these different things, his time in court and things like that. So I don't know, right? Because if this is being marketed, and I don't think it is, but if it's being marketed as this is just the first half of his life, then okay, I guess so. But also, I mean, again, it's going to be a tricky balance for no matter who does it. That being said, like we talked about at the beginning, I think no matter what, eyeballs are going to be on this movie. I think just as a film, regardless of who it's about and what it's about, it looks really good. It looks just really well shot, and the musical notes and the way that the trailer is cut together as well. I just think it looks energetic and frenetic in a really good way. And the actor who's playing Michael Jackson is his nephew, and he just looks like he's embodying the role. I also think it's a really smart thing to do to highlight Coleman Domingo. I don't think they did so really in that first trailer. I think he probably was in and out of it, but to really highlight Coleman Domingo, who is, I think, Miles Teller is in the film, and I think some other big actors are in the film, but really Coleman Domingo is the big name, I think, in the cast list as far as I saw. And he is a powerhouse, right? He is a powerhouse actor. He's amazing in whatever he did. I loved him in Sing Sing. He was great. And obviously Norman Osborn, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. So he's great. And putting him front and center in this movie, I think, or in this trailer rather, was a really good move. So I think just based on what I saw, right, in the trailer, I think that it looks like one of those musician biopics rather, that I think has that energy and has, what Bohemian Rhapsody did and Elvis and movies like that. It's just, again, this movie, no matter where it goes or what it does, is always going to be shrouded in a lot of other things. And whether or not that leads to success or whether or not that leads to failure is entirely, it remains a question that's up in the air. But we'll see in April. It's coming out in just a couple months here. And I'm going to be so curious to see how it does at the box office, how critics view it, and I think more importantly, how audiences are looking at the film that's presented to them. So we will see about that. Guys, what do you think about this new trailer for Michael, the Michael Jackson biopic? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, I have been doing something dangerous, admittedly. I have been making a big assumption. And as we all know, I'm not going to quote the saying here, but as we all know, to paraphrase, assumptions are not good because usually, if you make an assumption, you can look pretty foolish. So, long story short, I'd been making the assumption for the longest time, just because rumors and leakers and scoopers and my own basic intuition said, of course we're getting an Avengers Doomsday trailer at the Super Bowl. Of course we're getting a Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer at the Super Bowl. It turns out, most likely at least, we're not going to know for sure until the Super Bowl actually happens. I was wrong. I'm pretty sure I was wrong. Because we have reports now, again, from the more reputable sources in Hollywood, saying that no, it looks like Marvel will not be making a presence at all at the Super Bowl. So this report here that I'm reading is from Variety. And for those of you who are new to this kind of Super Bowl trailer watch game or whatever it is, because let's be frank, I mean, just to reveal my cards, I'm not rooting for either of the teams that are playing. I do like football, not rooting for the Seahawks or the Patriots. I'm really there for trailer watch this year. My team, sadly, is not in the Super Bowl, so that sucks for me. But anyways, I'm there for the trailers. And again, I was just thinking, okay, of course we're going to cover an Avengers trailer, we're going to cover a Spider-Man trailer, it's going to be a big week. And it's still going to be a big week because we're going to have lots of trailers to talk about. But usually what happens is about a week before the Super Bowl. So we're now less than a week away. And actually, when you're listening to this, it's probably going to be a couple days before because of the way that I release these clips. You know, these major sources, these major trades usually start to drop, oh, we know now which trailers are going to be at the Super Bowl. And they're usually pretty right. I mean, it's very rare, I think, for a surprise to come out at this late stage. And all these reports, I'm reading one from Variety, are confirming that while there are going to be some big trailers, there are not going to be the biggest trailers this year. So I'm reading from Variety, and I'm just gonna kind of skim through this. But Disney, quote, Disney is expected to air a trailer for The Mandalorian and Grogu. So that is one of them. Then they are also expected to release a spot for Toy Story 5. So another big Disney film. But, here it is, quote, but there won't be trailers for Avengers Doomsday or Marvel's other upcoming superhero adventure, Spider-Man Brand New Day, which, that is Sony, by the way. That is not Marvel. So Sony could have made an independent decision, I suppose. I mean, probably in conjunction with Marvel. But, you know, they could have made their own decision to release a Spider-Man trailer, but they also decided not to release one. Also, this article says, quote, Netflix, Apple, and Amazon MGM are not going to be airing any spots at the Super Bowl. Scrolling down, we'll talk about all that kind of stuff at the end. Warner Brothers is also not expected to spend heavily, and apparently Supergirl is not going to have a trailer at the Super Bowl, though DC Studios will tease Supergirl during the Puppy Bowl. Now, for those of you who remember, last year, also, a similar thing happened. It said no Superman trailer at the Super Bowl, but at the Puppy Bowl, there was going to be some kind of thing. And it turned out all that was Guy Gardner making fun of his own bowl cut. And that was literally it. And it's like, okay, you know, there wasn't a whole lot to talk about there. Apparently also, by the way, the pricing for these kinds of things, $7 to $10 million for 30 seconds of ad time. We'll get to that later because I think that is a very relevant thing to us as to why these trailers aren't coming out. Universal. The NBC owns Universal, which, by the way, is probably a factor. I don't know. I doubt that I actually don't know how this works, actually. If Universal is owned by NBC, and I think NBC is airing the Super Bowl, I want to say. I don't know if they get these spots for free, but Disclosure Day, Steven Spielberg's film, will get a trailer. The Super Mario Galaxy movie, which is Illumination, Universal, will get a trailer. And Minions 3 will get a trailer. So it seems like there is some kind of benefit to this. But Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey will not be getting a trailer at the Super Bowl. It also looks like a film like Dune Part 3 is not going to get a trailer, though I don't know if that's ready yet. Interestingly enough, Paramount also is going to have a Scream 7 trailer during the Super Bowl. And I think the pregame coverage, it seems like, is going to have some kind of coverage or some kind of teaser for Michael as well. Although we're going to talk about Michael and the new trailer that was released online anyways. So here's the thing, right? As we look at this, is it surprising that these big, because I think it's fair to say some of these movies that are going to have Super Bowl spots are going to make tons of money. I think Toy Story 4, right, made $1 billion. And Toy Story 5, if it's any good, I mean, if we learned anything from the 2025 box office, it's that kids' movies and movies, you know, targeted towards the younger audiences are crushing it right now. Zootopia 2, right? The Minecraft movie, Lilo and Stitch. These movies are crushing it. And Toy Story 5, I think, if it's good, is going to crush it at the box office. So, you know, it's not to say that these movies that are getting Super Bowl trailers are not going to do well. The Super Mario Galaxy movie, if it's any good, is going to probably make $1 billion. It's going to be huge. But it's interesting that the movies that these studios are probably their tentpole movies, The Odyssey, Avengers Doomsday, Spider-Man Brand New Day, for those three respective studios, for Universal, for Disney, and for Sony, those are the three biggest movies, arguably, of the entire year, aside from Dune Part 3, which again, maybe they just don't have a trailer ready. It's 8 months away. Maybe the price point for these spots is enough to say, okay, a film like the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which I'm sure a lot of kids or teens are going to be watching the Super Bowl. Let's get this trailer in front of their eyes. And maybe it's worth it to spend $10 million. But maybe the research showed that just compared to dropping Avengers trailers online or in front of Avatar films, as it were, there's not much benefit to spending this much money when they could do other things for the next 8 months, or 10 months rather. Maybe that's what the conclusion that they came to. I get that, frankly, for Avengers Doomsday. I think we had all been assuming just because all these mini trailers were kind of leading up to something we thought, so I get that. The other two films, though, were interesting. Maybe The Odyssey, people just think, you know what, it's The Odyssey. And maybe you see a trailer for The Odyssey and it just doesn't pop as much at a Super Bowl. That's fine. That's fair. The one movie that I'm a little, not concerned by, but curious by, is Spider-Man Brand New Day. Again, maybe Sony made the calculation that we released this trailer 2 weeks after the Super Bowl, it's going to crush it anyways. Doesn't really matter. But it feels like this is the time to release a teaser. Second week of February, right, February 8th. And Spider-Man Brand New Day is coming out July 30-something, 31st, 30th, something like that. So it's about 5.5 months away. That seems about right to release a first teaser. And where else to release a teaser to announce that, hey, Spider-Man, the biggest Marvel character, Spider-Man, is back, than at the Super Bowl. And so I find it interesting. I don't think this means the movie's in trouble and that they're just not ready. I guess there was some kind of math that they did where it was like, yeah, this just isn't worth it. But that's the movie to me that I'm circling and going, that's interesting. Because if you're talking about a trailer that's going to really pop in front of all the audiences, adults, comic book nerds, general movie-going audiences, everybody knows Spider-Man, kids, adults, even older people, right? The Spider-Man Brand New Day should be a 4-quadrant movie, a 4-quadrant trailer. The Odyssey, maybe less so, but Spider-Man, it should be. So, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to kind of get an explanation. It's also going to be interesting to see when and where the actual first Spider-Man teaser trailer actually does come out. So we'll see. But again, just to recap here, we're likely not going to be getting any kind of Marvel presence at the Super Bowl. I don't know when the first Avengers Doomsday trailer is coming out. Frankly, now that it's not going to happen at the Super Bowl, which is, again, where the most eyes all year are on for television, I don't think they have to rush it at all. They could wait till Comic-Con, frankly, which is still 5 months away. I think those first little teaser trailers in front of Avatar were just kind of the announcement of, yeah, this movie's coming. Get ready for it. And that's great. They don't have to do anything until Comic-Con, until July, frankly, until Spider-Man, frankly. So we'll see. We'll see what that turns into. And Spider-Man, again, I don't know. I feel like we're going to get a trailer in the next month or so. It feels like it's about time. But we'll see. Maybe they're holding on to something, and who knows, right? So anyways, guys, we'll talk about a lot of trailers next week. That'll be probably the majority of next week's podcast episode. But Spider-Man is absent. So we'll see what to make of that. Guys, let me know what you think about these trailers and the fact that Marvel is not going to be at the Super Bowl. Let me know what you think about any of this in the comments down below. And guys, that will do it for episode number 118 of the Access Blockbusters pod. Thank you so much for joining us next week. Fun episode ahead. Fun episode ahead. Lots of trailers to talk about based on the predictions. I think we're going to have a Mario trailer, Minions trailer, Toy Story trailer, just tons of trailers to talk about here. And look forward to that, guys. Look forward to that. I think it'll be a really, really fun episode to talk about. Although, no Marvel, it seems like. So we'll have to keep our eyes out for a future Doomsday or Spider-Man trailer. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining us again. If you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to do so on your way out. It would mean a whole lot to me. Leave a comment down below, leave a like, and check us out on the audio-only platforms. Leave a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Overcast. We are available on all of those platforms. Guys, that will do it for this week's episode of the Access Blockbusters pod, and I will see you guys in the next one.